What is learning? The answer to this question likely reflects the approach we take in our classrooms. One such theoretical approach is the constructivist theory of learning, which will be explored in this presentation. Firstly, an outline of the major features of the theory, along with its strengths and limitations, will be discussed. This will be followed by a reflection of how this theory relates to my own personal beliefs about effective teaching. While the constructivist approach is not a new concept and its effectiveness as a teaching method has been well established, Gillies and Boyle found that educators were reluctant to employ this approach in their classrooms due to a lack of confidence in balancing constructivist techniques with curriculum demands. As Porcaro points out, the question remains, how do we effectively incorporate a constructivist approach into classrooms that have such a strong instructivist history? Constructivist theory comes in multiple forms, including Piaget's cognitive constructivism and Vygotsky's social constructivism. As Chicoine and O'Donnell point out, all variant forms of constructivism operate from the premise that knowledge and meaning are constructed by the learner. The learner in this process is an active participant who brings with them a vast array of prior experience, which informs the construction of new or modified knowledge. According to Jonasson, the emphasis of this theory is on the creation of a subjective reality that occurs as a result of an individual's interaction with their physical and social environment. As such, it departs from traditional views which conceptualize learning as a transfer of objective fact from teacher to learner. From a social constructivist perspective, the role of social interaction in the construction of knowledge is of great significance. Porcaro describes Vygotsky's concept of the zone of proximal development as the process of knowledge formation through interaction with developmentally advanced peers. Ertmer and Newby highlight the importance of context from this theoretical standpoint. Behaviour is situationally dependent, and as a result, constructivists hold that learning should occur within relevant and authentic contexts. Alongside these assumptions about how learning occurs come implications for classroom practice. Mello, Silver and colleagues describe and clarify some learner-centred techniques often used by constructivist educators. Such techniques include discovery, inquiry and problem-based learning, where such learning can be either teacher-guided or independently student-driven. Most importantly, Porcaro states, the construction of individual and group meaning is valued over and above direct instruction from teacher to student. An obvious strength of this theoretical model is that it strongly supports the development of higher order thinking, or the analysis, evaluation and creation levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Collins, as well as Ertmer and Newby, have pointed out it is the application and transfer of knowledge rather than knowledge itself that is more important and adaptive in terms of learning. This model also emphasises the whole child rather than just focusing on intellectual development. Scott and Nut-Brown point to the effectiveness of the Quality in Diversity initiative, which has shown the physical, social and emotional development of the child is intrinsically linked to the intellectual development of the child and their achievement in school. The constructivist model of learning also has limitations. As alluded to in the introduction of this presentation, whilst constructivist methods have been shown to be highly efficacious in the classroom setting, Gillies and Boyle found that many educators fail to commit to this, to such an approach long term for a variety of reasons. Firstly, incorporating this model into regular classroom practice takes significantly more time and planning as compared to direct instructional models. Secondly, they found that many teachers were not confident in balancing this pedagogy against curriculum demands. Further, Hung and colleagues note many teachers doubt the efficacy of this approach, fear losing control of their students, and have concerns that students won't take responsibility for their own learning. These researchers indeed found that students often have difficulty in transitioning from a traditional learning environment into a more problem-based learning environment. But Porcaro points out that this is unfortunately a side effect of the dominance of the traditional instructivist model of education. Hung and colleagues found, however, that following the discomfort of this transition to a problem-based learning model, students indeed took on more personal responsibility for their learning as student and teacher roles changed within the classroom. From these findings, we can conclude that if this approach is to be adopted in a more mainstream way, teacher training needs to focus more on how to incorporate techniques proposed by the constructivist approach into classroom practice, along with perhaps a complete paradigm shift for the educational system in general. Constructivist theory resonates strongly with my personal values and beliefs about effective teaching. This theoretical framework is one that values and respects the child as a person and acknowledges a child's inner motivation to learn about their world. As Scott and Nutt-Brown in their chapter on the rights of the child in the learning environment point out, the interactive approach employed by constructivist educators allows for the holistic development of the child, not just intellectually, but physically, emotionally, and socially. This theory provides an excellent description of the learning process, as can be demonstrated by a couple of personal examples. When I was around 4 or 5 years old, I learnt to ride a two-wheeled bike through the process that is well described by Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. Our family owned only tricycles, but my next-door neighbour owned a bicycle. She was around the same age as me. One day she brought her bicycle to my house to play. I didn't know how to ride the bike, but after carefully observing her and how she carefully adjusted her centre of balance while riding, I was able to mimic the behaviour I observed. Amazingly and immediately, I could also now ride a two-wheeled bike, no training wheels required. Another example drawn from an experience in high school demonstrates the guided discovery technique often used within the constructivist approach. In theatre class, we learnt about the works of Bertolt Brecht, a famous German playwright who wrote plays about World Wars I and II. He used techniques within his plays that aimed to alienate his audience, such as characters who not only recited their lines but also gave commentary about their actions on stage. For example, instead of crying, a character might simply tell the audience they're crying. In this way, the teacher scaffolded our knowledge such that we were able to complete the next part of the task independently. So this included forming into groups of 3 and writing our own scene that incorporated Brechtian techniques that we had learnt about. Following this, each group was to perform their scene for the rest of the class. In this example, the student was active in the process of constructing their knowledge about Brechtian theatrical techniques. The task was also framed within a relevant and authentic context and involved learning through interaction and collaboration with peers. Constructivism offers an elegant framework with which we can understand the complexity of the learning process. Unlike more traditional dyadic models of learning, it emphasises the holistic development of the child, not just intellectually, but also physically, emotionally, and socially. However, in order to observe these educational benefits, a shift in teacher training as well as in dominant educational paradigm needs to occur. What's the point, after all, of this elegant model if no one is confident in employing its techniques?